Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Karen, and on my channel I help you bridge the gap or close the gap between the English that you learn in the classroom and the English that's actually used in real life. I have another listening practice video for you today, and I think it's going to be quite a long one. We're going to be listening to a guy, and he uses a few challenging words. So I hope that you learn a few new words today. He's at the airport and he's telling us about something that just happened at the airport. And he mentions a few countries. So my question for you today is, what countries is he going to? I'll play it for you 4 times as per usual, twice at the normal speed and then another 2 times at a slightly slower speed. And then after you listen to him, we can talk about a few things that he says today. Okay, let's go.
Okay, that was crazy. The guy who was sort of like checking me in, he calls the Australian government and he's like, just checking that this Australian resident has an exemption and like permission to leave. And the Australian government was like, yep. Then he has to call New Zealand because I'm transiting in New Zealand. And he's like, hey, just double checking that this person has the right to enter and like transit through New Zealand. They were like, yep. And then he has to call the US and he's like, oh, just checking that this guy can enter the US. And they were like, yep. It was a crazy process. Okay, that was crazy. The guy who was sort of like checking me in, he calls the Australian government and he's like, just checking that this Australian resident has an exemption and like permission to leave. And the Australian government was like, yep. Then he has to call New Zealand because I'm transiting in New Zealand. And he's like, hey, just double checking that this person has the right to enter and like transit through New Zealand. They were like, yep. And then he has to call the US and he's like, oh, just checking that this guy can enter the US. And they were like, yep. It was a crazy process. Okay, that was crazy. The guy who was sort of like checking me in, he calls the Australian government and he's like, just checking that this Australian resident has an exemption and like permission to leave. And the Australian government was like, yep. Then he has to call New Zealand because I'm transiting in New Zealand. And he's like, hey, just double checking that this person has the right to enter and like transit through New Zealand. They were like, yep. And then he has to call the US and he's like, oh, just checking that this guy can enter the US. And they were like, yep. It was a crazy process. Okay, that was crazy. The guy who was sort of like checking me in, he calls the Australian government and he's like, just checking that this Australian resident has an exemption and like permission to leave. And the Australian government was like, yep. Then he has to call New Zealand because I'm transiting in New Zealand. And he's like, hey, just double checking that this person has the right to enter and like transit through New Zealand. They were like, yep. And then he has to call the US and he's like, oh, just checking that this guy can enter the US. And they were like, yep. It was a crazy process.
Okay, that was crazy. The guy who was sort of like checking me in, he calls the Australian government and he's like, just checking that this Australian resident has an exemption and like permission to leave. And the Australian government was like, yeah. Then he has to call New Zealand because I'm transiting in New Zealand. And he's like, hey, just double checking that this person has the right to enter and like transit through New Zealand. They were like, yep. And then he has to call the US and he's like, oi, just checking that this guy can enter the US. And they were like, yep. But it was a crazy process. Okay, now let's talk about a few things that he said today. The first thing that he said was, okay, that was crazy. The guy who was sort of like checking me in.
Okay, that was crazy. The guy who was sort of like checking me in.
The guy who was sort of like checking me in. When you check in somewhere, like at a hotel or at the airport, you give your ticket or your passport and then they will arrange your flight for you if you're at the airport, or they will arrange your room for you if you're at a hotel. But because of COVID, the check-in process might have changed. So the way that he had to check in might have been different to how we would normally check in. So this guy at the airport was helping him check in, and it was similar to how we would normally check in, but it was just a little different in some way. So the guy who was sort of like checking me in.
The guy who was sort of like checking me in.
He continues and says he calls the Australian government. So the guy who's helping him check in, that guy calls the Australian government. Now that's something that's very different. When you check in at the airport, the person at the counter usually doesn't need to call the Australian government to tell them that you're traveling. This is already pretty crazy. So something is obviously going on. Going on, do you remember the meaning of this phrasal verb? It was in the 30-day phrasal verb challenge. Maybe the government is looking for him. They're trying to find him. Or maybe he was traveling when the travel rules were really strict and you had to get approval from the Australian government if you wanted to travel overseas. Calling the Australian government at the airport because someone is traveling overseas, this is very strange. This is not part of the usual check-in process.
He calls the Australian government.
Let's listen to the next part. He calls the Australian government and he's like, just checking that this person, this Australian resident.
He calls the Australian government and he's like, just checking that this person, this Australian resident.
A resident. This is just someone who lives in a particular place. It could be people who live in your apartment building, or it could be people living in a city or a whole country. You might have heard of the permanent resident visa, which is a visa that will allow you to stay in a particular country for as long as you like. Here he said this Australian resident. So he's talking about someone who lives in Australia. His home, where he lives, is Australia.
He calls the Australian government and he's like, just checking that this person, this Australian resident.
Let's listen to the last part of this sentence. This Australian resident has an exemption and like permission to leave.
This Australian resident has an exemption and like permission to leave.
An exemption is when you have special permission from the government or a school or university or some other organization, and you don't have to do something, but everyone else has to do it. For example, at university or at uni, as we would say in Australia, if your final grade in high school for maths was really high, then the university might give you an exemption, so you don't have to do maths in your first semester at uni. Small businesses might be exempt from having to pay tax this year because they've been affected really badly because of COVID restrictions. That would be nice, but I highly doubt that a government would give small businesses an exemption like this. So an exemption is when you have special permission from the government or a school or any other organization, and you don't have to do something, but everyone else has to do it. Here, the guy at the airport rang the Australian government to check if he has an exemption, if he's allowed to leave the country. There was a time during this COVID-19 pandemic when Australians were not allowed to leave the country and you had to get special permission from the government if you wanted to travel overseas. So he must have wanted to go overseas during this time. So the guy at the airport had to check with the Australian government if he was allowed to travel overseas when everyone else couldn't.
This Australian resident has an exemption and like permission to leave.
His next sentence was, then he has to call New Zealand because I'm transiting in New Zealand.
Then he has to call New Zealand because I'm transiting in New Zealand.
Transit. This can be a noun or a verb. Here he's using it as a verb, and it basically means that something or someone is going from one place to another. For example, if you have a package that's coming from here and this is your home and your package is here somewhere, then your package is in transit. Say you're traveling from your home country to Australia, but your plane has to stop somewhere here first before it flies to Australia. Say it has to stop in Singapore. So you have to spend a few hours at the airport in Singapore before you fly to Australia. You're not really staying in Singapore, you're just at the airport for a few hours. So you can say that you're transiting through Singapore or you're transiting through Singapore Airport. Singapore Airport, Changi, is amazing. I love this airport. This is probably my favorite airport in the whole world. If you've never been there, I hope you get the chance one day to go. It is beautiful. We lived in Singapore for a few years before we moved to Hong Kong, and I loved Changi Airport. I still do. It's just the best airport. Love it. Here, he's transiting through New Zealand. So he's flying from Australia to some other country, but he's transiting through New Zealand first before he flies to his actual destination.
Then he has to call New Zealand because I'm transiting in New Zealand.
And he's like, hey, just double checking that this person has the right to enter and transit through New Zealand.
And he's like, hey, just double checking that this person has the right to enter and transit through New Zealand.
Double checking. Double, so we're talking about two things, and checking. So we're checking something twice or we're checking something very carefully. Students usually double check their answers in a maths exam. They check their answers, and if they have time, they'll check them again. They will double check their answers. If you're going on an overseas holiday, you probably want to double check that you have your passport and any visas that you need. And you probably want to check that everything is switched off and locked in the house. Here, the guy at the airport is now calling New Zealand to make sure that the guy in our listening practice is allowed to enter New Zealand, if he has the right to enter and transit through New Zealand.
And he's like, hey, just double checking that this person has the right to enter and transit through New Zealand.
Let's listen to the last part of his story.
And then he has to call the US, and he's like, oh, just checking that this guy can enter the US. And they were like, yep. It was a crazy process.
So what are the two countries that he plans to go to? New Zealand and the US. But he's just transiting in New Zealand. His final destination is really the US.
And then he has to call the US, and he's like, oh, just checking that this guy can enter the US. And they were like, yep. It was a crazy process.
And I just wanted to mention the word like again. He said it so many times today. We'll listen to him again in a second. See if you can count how many times he said the word like today. Using like in everyday conversation is very common, and it can be used in a lot of different ways. But some of these ways can sound very casual, so you shouldn't really be using them in these ways when you're at work or when you're writing. The main way that he used like here was to tell you what someone else said. So instead of saying he said this, this and this, he just said he's like, or they were like. This is very common in everyday conversation when you're just talking to family and friends. And so it's also very casual, and so it's not really something that you should use at work. Like I've mentioned in previous videos, if you want to take your English to that next level, don't forget these small, easy words. Study how they're used in different situations because they're very common, much more than you would think, and we use them in a lot of different ways. I used like a lot in this vlog. See how many times I used the word like in that vlog too. So if you liked this video and found it useful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. Let's listen to him again at the normal speed. See how many times he says the word like today.
Okay, that was crazy. The guy who was sort of like checking me in, he calls the Australian government and he's like, just checking that this Australian resident has an exemption and like permission to leave. And the Australian government was like, yep. Then he has to call New Zealand because I'm transiting in New Zealand. And he's like, hey, just double checking that this person has the right to enter and like transit through New Zealand. They were like, yep. And then he has to call the US and he's like, oh, you're just checking that this guy can enter the US. And they were like, yep. It was a crazy process.
I talked about some more challenging words in this video, so I hope that you learned a few new ones today. Thank you for watching again. Keep practicing, stay safe out there, and I'll be back next week with another video. Bye! They're moving furniture upstairs. Is that what they're doing?